Hey, a couple of real life things are happening, so videos are very scarce right now. So, in order to carry you over, I thought I would compile all my Naruto reviews of Naruto Part 1 into one handy little video in case you don't want to hunt down the separate parts. The separate parts are staying on the channel. This is just for people who want all of it in one big chunk. I hope you have fun, and I hope to see you soon again once things have calmed down. Enjoy! What do you get when you combine a month-long lockdown and Netflix? You get many things, but among them, grown men rewatching their childhood favorites in an attempt to feel even the most minuscule shred of happiness during an unprecedented global pandemic. Yeah, I've been watching Naruto a lot lately. While I have reread the manga multiple times, as well as revisited specific sections of the anime in preparation for certain videos of mine, this is the first time in quite a while where I'm rewatching the entire anime specifically. And because I now have this channel, I thought, hey, let me review my first ever anime arc by arc and see what happens. For a little history, I got into Naruto when I was about 9 years old, finding German dubbed 3-minute clips in horrid quality on the now defunct Google videos. This launched me into a decade-long fan phase where I was pretty much obsessed with the series, watching the anime and reading the manga wherever and however I could find them. I was there when the Toby reveal happened, I was there when Kaguya appeared, and I was there when that final chapter dropped. It's been a long journey. I have gone from a child to a fully grown adult, and I've had many shifting and evolving thoughts on the series since then. Before my rewatch, my feelings can be summed up as thus. Part 1, up to until Sasuke leaves, is good. Most of Part 2, also known as Shippuden, is good too. The war arc is atrocious and the actual ending is insulting. I don't think too much of this is going to change, to be honest, but you never know, years can make a difference. So, join me as I rewatch my first anime ever and pop out these videos reviewing each arc as I finish. And we should obviously start with the one and only Land of Waves arc. Now, this one is gonna be a bit weird because I did make a dedicated video about this specific arc already, go watch it. But I'm gonna try and not repeat myself too much, since that video mostly focused on interpretation and analysis rather than just straight reviewing. I think when it comes to starting an anime, few things are as classic as that first few episodes of Naruto. Episode 1 gives us an incredibly strong hook with the story of the Nine Tails, the dilemma of Iruka wanting to nurture the child that holds the being that killed his parents, and of course, Naruto himself. While I do have my gripes with him, and don't worry, we'll get to that eventually, I think it's easy to see what made him so iconic and beloved. He is at once feisty and energetic, yet deeply emotional and introspective. Later parts of the series, and even this arc already, do sometimes play this up to an extreme where he becomes an obnoxious jackass, but when his character hits that sweet spot, it is quite compelling. The feelings of loneliness and of wanting to be seen are pretty universal, and it's not hard to see why they would resonate with a younger teen audience quite significantly. And while much of the humor is relatively dated, I did find myself endeared by the blonde little shit more than I expected going in. I was actually chuckling. However, he obviously has his flaws. As I said earlier, his character traits are too often exaggerated to the point where it becomes annoying, which is made worse by him having a really grating voice in all language versions available to me, Japanese, German, and English. And of course, his presence in the series, at least early on, is a bit odd in the sense that he doesn't feel like a main character. These early episodes go out of their way to make him make mistake after mistake, make him look like an idiot at every turn, and deny him pretty much every opportunity to really step up aside from some key instances. This is obviously done to make him more of an underdog, and in certain cases it works, but I think it sometimes goes too far in my opinion and loops back into making him just kinda difficult to really support at times. He yells and is stupid and runs into situations and then gets his ass kicked, and it's just like, okay, why am I rooting for you? Obviously, again, this is something that is specific from situation to situation. When he steps up against Zabuza, for example, that is a really cool moment, but it's kind of smothered in these moments where he's just a dumb jackass. Past episode 1, we get our first taste of a staple of Naruto. Useless episodes. Konohamaru episode? No thanks, we're good. The diarrhea episode? Skipped. Past these though, we get to meet the rest of the main cast, the equally iconic doofuses of Team 7 and their teacher. Sakura is worthless and easily one of the worst things in this entire series. Her motivation is incredibly petty, and compared to the two guys she's sandwiched in between, she feels like a joke character forced into the role of a main support. Her shtick of loving Sasuke and hating Naruto gets obnoxious very quickly, and I will not spend much talking about her, besides asking one question. Why the hell does her mental voice have a Texan accent in the dub? I'm sorry, I'm never doing that again. I'm not American. Sasuke, meanwhile, is obviously more of a force in the story, deuteragonist and rival to Naruto. While his later characterization is often somewhat controversial, these early episodes give us a pretty cool character that hides his pain and inadequacy under apathy and contempt, very much a quieter version of Naruto, defense mechanism and all. Seeing his cold confidence routinely crumble as he faces unbeatable opponents is pretty endearing and satisfying, and when combined with the competence he does show in other instances, it makes for a cool and compelling full package. This is however also a bit iffy, since he routinely ends up taking away Naruto's shine, again in an attempt to make Naruto more of an underdog. This ends up having the consequence that Naruto feels almost non-present at times, since Sasuke gets to do most of the heavy lifting. In the episode where he awakens the Sharingan, it genuinely feels like Sasuke is the main character. Beyond that, something I had completely forgotten about is that Sasuke randomly starting to monologue about his vengeful ambitions to people who have no clue what he's saying is peak comedy, even if it is probably unintentional. And finally, we get to Kakashi, who is easily the highlight in these early episodes. Both in English and in Japanese, he gets great voice actors who bring in a wit and spice to a speech that can be blood-curdlingly threatening one second and gut-bustingly funny the next. A good script in the English version helps accentuate that. Granted, I cannot judge the Japanese script, but this is my review, so. He's mostly used as a measuring stick for both power and experience in these early parts, things constantly being said to be this much stronger, weaker than Kakashi. However, beyond just that, he brings in a notion of maturity to this insane, goofy story. Him looking down at the memorial rock and talking about the short lives of ninja carries a weight with it that no one needs to explain to us. This man has seen some shit and I believe it, and it is incredibly effective. Also, he is responsible for some of the hypest moments in this arc, but we'll get to that. The plot of these early episodes is about as iconic as Naruto gets. The Bell Exam, followed by the mission to accompany a bridge builder, which quickly turns into a life or death gauntlet that raises fundamental questions about the life of ninja as a whole. I don't want to dive too deeply into the excellent villains and their motives in this arc, since I already did that in the other video, go watch it. So let's instead talk a bit about the structure of these events and how they relate to our main cast. The Bell Exams bring up a pretty simple question. Do you really want to be a ninja? Are you ready to do what it takes and carry the consequences? While the team initially manages to muster up a bit of teamwork and ingenuity to answer with a resounding yes by passing Kakashi's test, the events in the Land of Waves reiterate that question in a much darker tone. Are you willing to walk a path that will almost definitely result in the loss of humanity? A path paved with death and suffering, warfare and torture. This question is way harder to answer, and the difficulty of answering it catalyzes our two main characters in different ways. To Naruto, the lives and deaths of Zabuza and Haku represent a worst-case scenario, existences wasted on scraps of appreciation and a humanity lost to the cruelty of the ninja world. This experience motivates him to grow philosophically, to rationalize his dreams and find a way to pursue them without succumbing to the heartlessness of the shinobi lifestyle. In short, to find his ninja way. To Sasuke, the clash with the duo of the Mist is less about what the cruelty of the world means for him as a ninja, but rather what it means for his position in the world and his strength. When faced with the gap in strength between him and Zabuza and Haku, he is forced to realize that his bravado and confidence just ain't gonna cut it. he is still powerless when up against the brutality of the real ninja world. Thus, he resolves himself to grow physically and become strong enough to achieve his ambition, a much darker takeaway from his peer. These two different interpretations of the events by these two characters are made even better by the slowly developing rivalry of the two. While much of the series is dedicated to their bond, this arc shines in showing that bond through implicit and explicit means. Their race to the top of the trees is an excellent vehicle for that relationship, showing their drive, resilience, and also their occasional willingness to communicate and cooperate. Their conversation in the ice prison boiling down to "I hate you" is a bit lame, since it kinda makes all the build-up of the relationship feel pretty meaningless at first, but it's pretty obviously just facades. However, it starts the trend of the story not being able to decide whether they like each other or not, which is an issue that would unfortunately only become more prominent as the series went on. Beyond this arc delivers everything a first arc should. It introduces the world and the power system in a satisfying manner without it being too front-loaded. I love the way the shinobi system is explained in this arc. The way it feels like this sort of paramilitary structure layered on top of the actual government is something that completely flew over my head when I was a kid, but it is actually ingenious. It gives most of the cast a bit of shine, even if Naruto is a bit scarce, and it gives us our first taste of shinobi warfare as well as the classic Naruto feels. Inari's story is moving and surprisingly mature, as is Haku's. One thing though that I wish would have happened is for Sasuke to actually bring in his perspective more often. Inari's story should realistically resonate with him, but he doesn't really remark on it whatsoever, which I feel is a bit of a missed opportunity to develop him further. And of course, Sakura just exists. Her having innately more sophisticated chakra control is appreciated, but she literally doesn't do a single thing in both major encounters in this arc, which is unfortunate. Meanwhile, Kakashi puts in work, easily cementing himself as a cornerstone of the series in both general character and power. Both times, his contributions to the fight are just so well executed, as his actions show us the various intricacies of shinobi combat. The benefit of having a character this experienced in the series this early on is it can show very high level combat at this point without forcing our as of yet baby main cast to grow up too quickly. Lastly, I want to talk about animation, since I am watching the anime specifically. Naruto as a series has the quirk of hosting a large variety of different animators and staff throughout its run, which causes the visual quality and character of the series to vary quite wildly. In the Land of Waves arc, which comprises the first 19 episodes of the anime, this variation isn't felt for the most part, since the first 16 episodes are consistently bad. Barely moving PowerPoint presentations with an absolutely snail pacing, these early eps are your standard average early 2000s anime, relatively inept at holding your attention visually. But then, out of nowhere, the last 3 episodes of this arc, 17, 18, and 19, do an insane jump in quality and deliver high quality cut after high quality cut, with some truly great use of 3D and Sakuga. It's amazing how this improves the viewing quality almost immediately, as now the actions on screen match the bombast the plot wants them to have. When this clip plays, showing the shockwave after Kakashi's Raikiri hits, I always almost jump out of my seat because it just sells the power and impact so well. This is what good animation can do for a series, and I'm so glad that the final stretch received this extra bit of polish. All in all, the Land of Waves arc is probably one of the best first arcs in shonen. It introduces us to a myriad of cool concepts that both work in their initial state, yet are ripe for expansion. I was surprised at how many things that would later become important parts of Naruto originated here. The rock that has Obito's name on it, the way the ninja system is perceived, it is all there already. And while we now know that Kishimoto had only planned 8 chapters when he started Naruto, it is still incredible to see how cleverly he weaved this in such a way that he could expand it with no effort. This arc develops the characters and sets them on their journeys in a believable and sympathetic way, while also depicting a truly tragic and compelling duo of villains that intrinsically tie into the themes of the arc. Even the occasional misses in pacing and characterization can't really diminish the experience much. And it does all of this while also being genuinely entertaining to watch. I had a blast. I think an 8 out of 10 is therefore a fair rating. Will Naruto's quality continue? What other challenges will this cast face? Will it all go down the shit? And what will this grumpy anime tuber person think of it? Well, these questions will be answered in the next episode, where we tackle the Chunin Exams, also known as the most overrated arc in all of shonen. I'm sorry, waiter, what is this? Is the Black Clover tournament arc, sir? Send it back to the chef, you ignoramus. I only indulge in the classic arcs. When talking about shonen, people will often bring up the idea of classic arcs. That is to say, a story segment of a series that was so good that it launched the series into iconic status. Somehow. While I think that this notion is ridiculous, there is something to be said about arcs that truly elevate the series to a new level. How convenient then that we now, in our journey to reviewing my childhood favorite show, reach what is possibly cited as one of the earliest examples of a classic arc, Naruto's Chunin Exam arc. Or as I like to call it, overrated. Now, as you've certainly seen from the title, I will be reviewing this arc in 2 parts. Why? Because this arc is thick. It's pretty long and there is a lot of stuff going on, so I decided I'd just make 2 videos instead of just doing a single video that's super smushed up or whatever. So this first part will cover up until the end to the preliminary battle test in that big hall with the cool hand sign statue. So, after the events of the Land of Waves, which served as a sort of introduction arc which presented us with the basic character outlines and the thematic ideas of the series, basic narrative logic would dictate that we now get a story segment focusing on both expanding the world and intensifying as well as producing central conflicts. Enter the Chunin Exam arc, where our trio of monobrain cell wielders signs up for a big, multi-stage test to eventually progress to the next level of ninjahood, going from the status of private or genin to squad leader or chunin. This arc is noteworthy as it is the first big climax of the series, so to speak. It's almost triple the length of the previous arc and features dozens of characters and moving pieces, and it really feels like this is the first time for the story to really stretch its legs and get ambitious. This is also reflected in the anime production, as the direction and cinematography take on a new tone and put a much stronger focus on creating tension and visual symbolism, which again works to elevate this story segment beyond the last one in terms of polish and visual identity. Characters like Gaara and Orochimaru get treated like calamities, whose presence creates tension and eeriness without them actually doing anything, just by the use of visuals and sound design alone. Looking at these aspects, it's easy to see why this arc is often cited as the one that made Naruto into a classic, as it on the surface presents a serious upgrade in scope and ambition from the previous arc. It's kinda how Assassin's Creed 2 is considered a milestone, not because of how good it is by itself, but because of how much of a jump in quality and ambition it presents when compared to the original Assassin's Creed. Odd example, I know, but I am an odd man. However, as you might have gleaned from my tone and the intro, I am not entirely convinced. Even before this rewatch, I knew that I had several issues with this arc, which we'll talk about it in a bit. For now though, I want to ask one thing. Why the fuck do Naruto and Sasuke hate each other now at the beginning? Seriously, we watched them push and inspire each other in the previous arc. Sasuke fucking fake died to save Naruto, but now we're told they just become more resentful because of that? What? This almost feels like the editorial department told Kishimoto to keep the rivalry going, even though the previous arc kinda got them to a next level of friendship, so this just feels really weird. Past this, however, the arc starts off really strong. Gaara is a terrifying introduction who very quickly establishes himself as a major threat without doing much of anything at first, just purely through dialogue, demeanor, and the aforementioned change in direction. His presence, as well as that of many other participants, also works in fleshing out the ninja world, with the various hidden villages and their distinctive outfits and jutsu. We even get a lecture on international power balance dynamics by Kabuto and his Yu-Gi-Oh cards? Seriously, what was the point of these? They never even come up again. Were they meant to advertise merch? Can I buy these? Is it time to duel? Speaking of new introductions, this segment also marks the first appearance of everyone's favorite character, Rock Lee. While his crush on Sakura is nonsensical and kinda cringy, and don't worry, I have a few things to say about Sakura in a bit, it kinda fits into his whole goofy, overly energetic shtick. He is basically a Naruto ramped up to 11, both in his underdog ideology and his demeanor, and it's easy to see why people like him so much. He's just very likable. His relationship with his master, Guy, as well as his humbling of Sasuke, really sell him as one of the most entertaining parts of this arc. Beyond introductions, however, the first exam our fellas partake in, the written test, is super cool. The way the test forces the Genin to employ high-level recon tactics to cheat, as well as how it tests a resolve, is a really clever back and forth that nicely introduces the mind games inherent to ninja warfare. It's super satisfying and interesting seeing the different ways in which each student cheats, and details like how almost every team cooperates with themselves except Gaara, where he just does his own thing and leaves Temari and Kankuro on their own, are just nice touches. That being said, I'm 23 now, it's almost 15-ish years since I first watched this episode, and I still do not believe for a second that 1010 actually passed. This bitch put up multiple mirrors that are clearly visible onto the ceiling. How the fuck did no one just look up? But once the first test is over, we get to the main reason I dreaded revisiting this arc. The Forest of fucking Death. I'm gonna go ahead and say it, I really dislike this section of the story. For one, it drags on way too long. The forest part could and should end after Sasuke reawakens with the curse mark and cripples Zaku, but instead we need another 6 episodes of them dicking around for some reason. I really don't care about them fighting a bunch of random clones, it doesn't show me anything new. Also, the actual lesson this test is supposed to teach them is kinda weird. Don't get me wrong, obviously survival and reconnaissance training is important and makes sense, but once they combine the Heaven and Earth scrolls to receive the actual final lesson and message by Iruka, that lesson that's imparted onto them boils down to, if your body is weak, train your body. If your mind is weak, train your mind. Which is super banal. It's a very obvious statement and just a disappointing reward for surviving this grueling gauntlet and for watching these episodes. And lastly, this section features a hefty amount of Sakura development. Which is good, right? Wrong, it's awful. Sakura is, on paper, a cool character in the sense that her story about overcoming insecurity while also balancing the dangers of overconfidence is pretty compelling as an idea. Her relationship to Ino and their stories, both here in the forest and later in their match, actually managed to be emotionally resonant and moving, and I'd even call it a good piece of characterization, if only it weren't for a tiny detail. You see, the core motivation and conflict within Sakura is her crush on Sasuke, and that is stupid, and here's why. Obviously, love can work perfectly as a character motivation. Saying otherwise would be going against actual centuries worth of literature, and who am I to do that? But love, like any motivation, needs a certain context and depth in order to carry the character's arc believably. For example, Hinata is basically the same, with her core feature being her crush on Naruto. But with her, we get a very clear reason and context for that crush. She sees Naruto as someone who inspires her to do better, to get out of her shell and to push forward on her path, which connects to her journey about confidence and ambition regarding her heritage and place in the Hyuga dynasty. Her love-based motivation works as an extension of a deeper desire that's rooted in her personality. Compare that to Sakura's crush to Sasuke. We are never told why she likes him or how her love to him actually relates to her issues and insecurity. It is completely separate from her core character, and because of that, it has almost no depth or context. Which would be fine if it were just a gag, but this forest arc makes it clear that this is supposed to be the core of her character, and it's just too petty and shallow to carry all the melodrama the show drenches its characters in. Moments like Sakura cutting her hair or her fight against Ino are really cool until you remember what it is fundamentally about, and then it suddenly just becomes laughable. As I said last time, it feels like Kishimoto designed Sakura as a joke character, but then decided to keep her around without changing too much, and it really got on my nerves. Like, I wanna like these scenes, but whenever I think about the fact that all of this is just about her having a baby crush on someone, based on nothing but, I guess he's cool and cute, it just makes me so upset. It's so annoying that you have this good character template and just butcher it by not giving it any of the thought that it deserves. Also, girl, why are you biting him?
You have a knife.
The forest isn't all bad though. In fact, all the way until Sasuke gets bitten by Orochimaru, it's actually really good. A constant roller coaster of intense action with some great stuff sprinkled in everywhere. I particularly liked how Sasuke's and Naruto's rivalry is evolved here. Past that initial blunder I mentioned earlier, it really starts feeling like the two know and respect each other in their own way, willing to compete against but also fight for one another. This also makes moments like Naruto calling out Sasuke's cowardice so much more satisfying. Also, Orochimaru's introduction is phenomenal, being slowly built up by gradually revealing that something is wrong until the mask falls and he is revealed to us as this inhuman snake wizard. Considering that, at this point, Naruto's central theme still is what does it mean to be a ninja, the idea of the main villain being a ninja who gave up his humanity to become the strongest is a super cool concept. Additionally, he elaborates on the bloodlust and violence expert ninja exude, something that we saw with Zabuza and Kakashi too. This is a really neat subversion of Naruto's goal, since the plateau of greatness he aspires towards seems to be inherently interwoven with becoming a monster whose very presence causes weak individuals to vomit and faint. Therefore, Orochimaru serves as an even stronger reminder of the hurdle Naruto has to face than even Zabuza was, because becoming Hokage and becoming the greatest ninja of all means having to reconcile this inhumanity, this violence within yourself. It turns this sort of happy-go-lucky goal of I will be the best into something a lot more sinister, and I really like that. All of this, however, just makes me sadder that Orochimaru didn't end up becoming the main villain in the end, but don't worry, we'll talk about that eventually. Also, The Forest is the first arc to feature an episode by the legendary Norio Matsumoto, which turns the fight between Sasuke and Orochimaru into a true feast for the eyes. I know people love to take screenshots of random frames here and say, oh, look at the animation, but in motion, this is phenomenal, and you will not convince me otherwise. Once The Forest ends, we reach the preliminary battle exam, and this is, like The Forest, a bit of a mixed bag. I already mentioned how both good and terrible all things Sakura are, and her fight is no exception. I did end up getting kind of emotional at their backstory, but again, once I remembered what this was actually about, it all just kind of falls apart. Then you have fights like Hinata vs Neji, which are fantastic. The emotionality there is brilliant, and I really like how intense the Hyuga art style is. Fighting with your palms and having these slapping noises where you see the chakra flowing out of them is such a cool visual, and I enjoyed it thoroughly. And then you have stuff like Naruto vs Kiba, which is a cool fight held back by some truly terrible animation. Truth be told, with an anime as long as Naruto, with a studio like Studio Pierrot, I think it was inevitable that some episodes would look bad. It's just unfortunate it was Naruto's fight specifically that got this treatment. And then there's shit like Dosu vs Shoji, which is very forgettable. And of course stuff right there in the middle, like Shikamaru vs Kin, which is cool, has some nice stuff, and it starts the trend of Shikamaru being one of the best characters in this show. No, seriously, you're gonna hear me say this a couple of times. Shikamaru is Naruto's actual best friend. Sasuke can go fuck himself. But that's not what you want me to talk about. No. You want me to talk about the fight that made this stupid gym hall looking place famous. You want me to talk about the fight that gets reposted everywhere at least once a week. You want me to talk about Lee versus Gaara. I think what makes this fight so salient and so memorable, aside from the great choreography and the obvious emotional roller coaster, is how this fight feeds back into the central question. What does it mean to be a ninja? Lee is, in many ways, a Naruto who is further along on the same path, to become recognized and accepted as a result of your hard work. And so, as he clashes with Gaara, what is at stake is not just his future, but that of Naruto as well. Which is why him losing and being crippled for life is such a devastating and emotionally hard-hitting moment. Naruto's goal has just been confirmed to be even harder than him and us imagined, if not actually impossible. In Naruto, one fundamental aspect of every character is them looking for their path through life, their unique way to get through this ninja world. And for a lot of these characters, their ninja way is pretty much all that keeps them together. And Lee is, as I've said, very much just a copy of Naruto, someone who has gone further along on that path and who now crashes against an insurmountable wall, which itself has implications for what Naruto might have to encounter eventually. And I think that is why this fight stays in everyone's mind so much. It's almost a confirmation that Naruto will have to fail eventually. But it just makes us and Naruto a lot more ambitious and a lot more resilient to this realization. Also, as I said before, I am an adult now, but Jesus Christ, seeing Lee's backstory and then him getting up while he's unconscious, it actually got to me pretty badly this time around. Maybe it's because we're living through emotionally very unstable times, but something about this really broke me. And as I've stated before, I think, in a previous video, as an adult, finding things that emotionally touch you properly is super valuable, because as you become older, it becomes harder for you to really show and feel your own emotions, because that's kind of just how being an adult works. Therefore, stuff like this is stuff that I really appreciate, and I cannot applaud Kishimoto for this specific part enough. Don't worry, I'll go back to shitting on him soon enough. And with this, the preliminary rounds of Chunin Exams as well as this video come to an end. Overall, you can probably tell that I had a lot more issue with this section than with the previous one. This part of the story has some insanely high highs and really low lows. Boy, I wonder if that'll become a pattern. But overall, I had fun and that's what matters. The forest part is way too long and Sakura fucking sucks, but honestly, I still had fun. Yes, the start of the arc has a really weird thing with Naruto and Sasuke's relationship, and Sakura still sucks, and the forest is long, but as you can tell, I'm kind of running out of shit to criticize because, as I said, I had a lot of fun with most of it. I thought the first exam was good, I thought the preliminary battle exam was good, so yeah, 6 out of 10, Sakura needs to get shot. See you all next time when we answer the question, how badly have the Jiraiya episodes aged?
You know, you have quite a tight, sexy little body.
Good lord, Japan, what is up with you? So yeah, if you're new here, hi, I'm Oceaniz and Naruto was my first ever anime, so now I'm reviewing all of it, or as much as I can get through before people lose interest. Last time we checked out the fun but inconsistent first half of the Chunin exam arc, and so, because 2 follows 1, profound I know, it's time for us to discuss the second half of Naruto's first major climax arc, from where we left off last time, where our participants did the preliminary rounds all the way to the end of the arc. So, join me today as we ask, what is love? Baby, don't... So, after the emotionally charged conclusion of the preliminary rounds, the remaining participants of the Chunin exam arc are given 1 month to prepare for the grand finale, unknowing of the fact that in the shadows, an evil is stirring, preparing to launch a full-on assault on the Hidden Leaf village. Before anything else, I want to mention that I really like that they get a month to prepare. It's just one of those things that makes sense, works for the narrative, and creates anticipation. It makes sense because with the grand finale being a sort of exhibition, they'd want the participants to bring their absolute A game, so them being given both time and their matchup in advance is just a sensible decision. It makes sense. I like it when things make sense. Quote me on that. It's cool. It works for the narrative because it creates a natural break from the non-stop action of the arc thus far, slowing down the pace and allowing the story to breathe a bit, which is nice. And it creates anticipation since now we spend approximately 10 episodes slowly building towards and approaching the big event, with glimpses of our participants giving us more and more hype every step along the way. So overall, I really appreciate this break we get, more than I did as a kid where I was stupid and just wanted to see the pew-pew fights. It's just such a smart move, and one newer series could learn from in my opinion. Many modern battle shonen series are now very focused on being snappy and fast-paced to get to good stuff as quickly as possible. That is often good because they're also at a much bigger risk of cancellation. However, it does mean they tend to miss out on those little narrative coffee breaks, so to speak, that can really amplify and elevate the pacing of the story, so I'm really happy to see this here in Naruto. Speaking of the pacing, we mentioned last time how the direction and cinematography of the anime took a big leap for the Chunin Exams, with a bigger focus on deliberate tension and slow visual build-up. This continues into this portion of the arc as well, arguably getting even better. Pretty much every scene that involves the secret evil plot or Gaara is imbued with a palpable sense of dread and terror thanks to lighting and directorial techniques. A standout example of this is the sequence when Gaara approaches Lee's hospital room so he can finish him off. The way the rooms, hallways and shots are arranged and shown, you're never quite sure who is where, and thanks to some really clever tricks with the doors and hands, this uncertainty remains until the moment the tension is released and we're shown who is safe and who encountered Gaara. This is an editing trick Naruto would reuse quite a few more times, and that's perfectly fine. If there's any trick that's worth repeating, it's this one, as it remains pretty cool and effective. However, this focus on tension and long-windedness in the direction does eventually bite the anime in the ass, but more on that in a bit. Enough about the pace and direction though, let's get into the actual meat of the content. This in-between break time is essentially split between serious build-up and tension and Naruto fun time, both of which I appreciate a lot. We get the tension we mentioned earlier in order to build up the next event, but we also get the fun time as a way to just chill and relax and get to know Naruto a bit more. With that fun time, however, also comes the introduction of one of my favorite characters, Jiraiya the Toad Mountain Sage. And there is no nice way of saying this. His introduction episodes have not aged well at all. The pervy old man is a pretty standard anime trope that we kinda got used to, but honestly, it shouldn't be and we shouldn't have gotten used to it. Now, I'm not about to shit on a 20-year-old series written in a conservative traditionalist country because it has humor that's insensitive for modern standards. I don't think that's very reasonable. However, I just wouldn't feel comfortable making this video without at least mentioning it. It's creepy, annoying, and not even all that funny to begin with. It's not a huge part of this portion, but it is there, so be aware in case this is a topic you are affected by. That aside, Jiraiya is super cool. He is kinda what I expected Kakashi to be right at the start when I first started Naruto years ago. When I first watched it, I thought Kakashi was gonna be tough but kind, stern but a bit of a softie inside, which he is in a way, but he is a lot more aloof and nice than I expected. He's just a genuinely casual guy. Meanwhile, Jiraiya is a straight up dickhead who bullies Naruto constantly while being invested in his growth, which is paradoxically endearing. He also has this air of higher knowledge about him, like he's aware of many more things than he lets on, which of course paves the way for the series going forward. He's also the first one to teach Naruto a jutsu other than shadow clones, which finally brings variety into his moveset. Admittedly, the summoning jutsu is not something he busts out all that often, but oh well, at least he learned more sophisticated chakra control. Before we get to the final exam though, there is one more teeny tiny scene that kinda surprised me out of nowhere. Naruto's little chat with Hinata on his way to the arena. Naruto as a series is full of monologues and soliloquies, with characters often talking and thinking to themselves about themselves. This happens so often that it is sometimes hard to remember which character has only told us and what they've told other characters. And while Naruto has often soliloquized to the audience about his struggles and insecurities, the first character within the story he verbally and explicitly opens up about his struggles to is Hinata in this scene. And this kinda shocked me. I remembered this scene, I knew it existed, but I had completely forgotten that it carried this much characterizational weight, because it makes a clear bond between Hinata and Naruto, with it making Hinata someone Naruto trusts enough to open up in such a way, which is odd and nice. I am not about to call Naruto x Hinata a well-written romance, because it simply isn't, but as someone who really likes that pairing and wished we got more substance to it, I really liked and appreciated this scene. I actually rewatched it immediately after it played because I just wanted more of it. Alright, time for the main event, for real this time. The way the final exam is structured is actually really cool. Winning doesn't guarantee passing, and losing doesn't mean you failed. It's more like an exhibition with a jury deciding who impressed them and who didn't. So the only reason winning matters is that you get to fight more often and show your skills more. I really like this idea. It makes it feel more like an exam and also ties into the concept of the Chunin Exams being a political event and show of power. In shonen anime, we too often get exams that are just straight up fighting, and it kind of removes it from that sort of sociological school setting. Meanwhile here, by making it a sort of exhibition, you preserve the feeling that this is an exam, that this is a formative event, and I really like that. So, the first fight begins, and we're already kind of in a pickle. I love Naruto vs Neji. The dynamics of that fight, as well as the emotional hook of the Hyuga dilemma, are fantastic. The fight itself is a bit on the simpler side for sure, but it still has its intricacies. For example, on this rewatch I noticed that once he realizes which Naruto are clones, Neji doesn't bother using the gentle palm and instead just starts slugging the clones with his fists, which is super cool. Why would he waste time blocking the chakra points of a shadow clone? And of course, the final punch is immensely satisfying, probably one of the better examples of the last minute surprise twist victory in Naruto. However, while in isolation and in the context of this arc, this fight is really good, watching it now, knowing how Naruto ends, is awkward. This fight is fundamentally about how destiny is not set in stone, and that, by your own hard work and effort, you can forge your own path against what you may think is predetermined. This is an empowering and good message, but as the series went on, only one of these two fellas was proven right. And it ain't Naruto. When Neji says that Naruto was destined to beat him, he is absolutely right. Because Naruto is, as we now know, the reincarnation of one half of Ninja Jesus, as well as the heir to one of the most powerful ninjas in the entire story. Naruto was, to an extent, always destined for greatness. This makes this fight's thematic core a bit odd in the sense that it doesn't age well once you know the direction the series is headed in, which is unfortunate. Aside from that though, if we focus on the now, the fight is emotionally compelling, well structured, and fun. It has a few too many flashbacks, but whatever, it's Naruto. Also, Naruto promising to fix the Hyuga clan once he's Hokage is really sweet. I'm sure that'll actually happen eventually, right? Moving on, we get to Shikamaru's fight, which is just more of Shikamaru being the best character out of the Genin. His attitude really resonated with me on this rewatch, which might honestly say more about me than it does about this show. Regardless, his elaborate mind games are absolutely delightful to watch, and I really like how his intelligence is portrayed in a way that we can follow it without it being obvious and banal. When they say he excels in abstract thinking, they really mean it. Also, I find it hilarious that intelligence is measured in IQ in Ninja World, because that implies that they went through the same psychology development that our world did. Can't wait to see how the ninjas handled the Stanford prison experiment. As Sasuke reappears in his worst costume of the entire series and the fight with Gaara gets going, the arc transitions into its climax, the Konoha Crush operation. All the tension that's been building up throughout the past 30-ish episodes gets released in one enormous and spectacular gauntlet of clashes and conflicts as the Leaf Village is invaded by Sand Ninja, Sound Mutants, traitors, and a giant snake. It definitely manages to feel like the series' first major turning point, as the home of the Leaf Ninjas is torn asunder by the ugly conflicts of the world. This section features some absolute highlights. I adore seeing Kakashi and Guy work together. Their chemistry is one of the most effortlessly funny aspects of Naruto in general. I also really enjoy seeing Shikamaru take charge during the pursuit of Gaara. The scene of him accepting that he will die a hero's death despite him specifically having wished to avoid that is surprisingly poignant and moving. However, there is one thing that mars this part of the arc, and that is the pacing. Remember how I praised the slow, deliberate pacing earlier? Yeah, that made sense during the build-up phases, since that built anticipation as well as dread. However, as soon as Konoha Crush starts, the tension is released into a snappy, bombastic climax, a torrent of hype that needs the sort of direction that accommodates that. But the direction and pacing don't actually change to accommodate for this release intention, instead still being as slow as before. This might have been done to stretch the arc out, or it might have been a creative decision. Either way, I think it doesn't exactly work out too well, often robbing moments of immediate momentum and turning desperate maneuvers into slow-mo galleries. The most evident and also most tragic example of this comes in one of the major fights of this arc, Orochimaru vs Sarutobi. The fight starts off really well. Sarutobi busts out some really cool techniques. Orochimaru is busy being one of the best villains in this show, Monkey. However, as the fight continues and eventually looks hopeless, the third Hokage resolves himself to a last-ditch effort to defeat the evil Snake Man. Using the Reaper Death Seal, he grabs hold of Orochimaru's soul and, in a final gambit, endeavors to rip it straight from its mortal coil. Now, hold that thought. You holding it? Good. Keep holding. Keep holding it? Now, keep holding it for 6 episodes! Yeah, you heard me right. This fast, desperate attempt at victory is stretched from episode 73 all the way to episode 79, when the arc ends. Every episode focuses on other stuff, and then cuts away to this exact shot, where Sarutobi and Orochimaru say some variation of, "You old fart, you can't do this! Well, watch me, Snake Boy!" and then we cut away again. It robs one of the most important moments of the arc of all of its immediacy and turns it into an exhausting, tedious chore to watch. Sure, in the end it coalesces into a pretty satisfying montage where the Hokage holds a cool speech while dying and while Naruto beats Gaara, but I just don't think it was worth it overall. By the end of it, I was just tired of seeing this stupid forest. Oh, wait, what's this? Oh my, kids, do you know what time it is? It's time to gush about Gaara! Gaara is one of the best characters in all of Naruto, and one of the best parts of this arc. I didn't really mention him much last video because much of his characterization happens in this half, and my oh my, what great character work it is. Gaara rides that perfect line between perpetrator and victim. It is actually insane how well it works. His actions make him look and feel like a monstrous villain, but his backstory and emotional breakdowns present the imagery of a tearful child. These dichotomies are enhanced by more symbolic traits, like how he is called the man who has never been hurt, despite being in constant emotional turmoil, or how the kanji for love is carved into his face through violence, bloodshed, and madness. He is a boy caught in a web of contradictions and lies, and through that he's molded into an insane and deranged monster, and it is through this monstrous tragedy that Naruto evolves its central question. In addition to asking, can ninjahood exist without eroding one's humanity, the series now also asks, can love, a human emotion like that, exist in a world of violence? If so, what form does it take? This shift in focus is also beautifully illustrated in Gaara's flashback segments, which tell a truly heartbreaking story about Gaara's realization of his cursed place in the village. While watching though, and this isn't a criticism by the way, just something that crossed my mind, I was wondering if this could have maybe been even better if we and Gaara never found out if the assassin was actually Yashamaru or not. Instead, have Yashamaru say he leaves for a mission, assassin gets clapped, face stays hidden, speech is more general about how even those Gaara thinks love him are only acting in order to keep Shukaku at bay, have Gaara think he saw a cut in the assassin's finger before the boom, Yashamaru never returns from his mission. Something like this could have added an additional layer of uncertainty and ambiguity to Gaara's past, which would have driven him even more insane, and would have encouraged and enforced those dichotomies. As I said, this not happening isn't a bad thing, this is already a phenomenal story, I just thought about it while watching it. Also, in the dub, Gaara is voiced by Liam O'Brien, a veteran actor who for the most part does an okay job, sometimes he's a bit too edgy, but when he screams, he screams. In other cases, I might have called this overacted, but considering that Gaara is losing his absolute shit because of seeing his blood for the first time, I think it's appropriate. Anyway, Gaara gets bonked, arc done, time to be sad now. Except, I'm not. At least not about Sarutobi. The funeral scene itself is great, and we'll talk about it in a second, but with the knowledge that Naruto's parents specifically ask Sarutobi to ensure that Naruto is treated as a hero by the village, which Sarutobi obviously didn't do for some unexplained reason, it's pretty undeniable that the third Hokage is more or less solely responsible for Naruto's suffering. So, nice try, show, but I am not about to feel bad for this goon. But, as I said, the funeral scene is great because it doesn't just hinge on Sarutobi. It itself presents a surprisingly mature discussion on the topic of loss and death, and how we humans can use community and camaraderie to overcome the horrible sting of the Reaper that awaits all of us at the end of our mortal existence. Also, Obito is mentioned, by name, which is kinda crazy considering how long it would be before he actually appears. Cool, Kishimoto, cool. Alright, arc over, rating time. As you can tell, I liked this half of the arc more than the last one, while still having a few reservations regarding specific instances and aspects, specifically the pacing. Overall, I give this half a 7 out of 10. Now, what should we give the Chunin arc as a whole? Well, mathematically, since I gave the first half a 6, and now I gave this half a 7, I should give it a 6.5 on a whole, but nah. I had more fun than that. I think the entire Chunin arc as a whole is more of a 7. So yeah, Chunin arc gets a 7 out of 10, fuck Sarutobi. Man, that arc was kinda long, I'm getting tired. What's that? The next video is about the Tsunade arc? Perfect, that shit is so boring I'll fall asleep immediately. Whoa! I'm awake. I'm awake. Alright. I'm motivated. I cannot wait to keep reviewing Naruto, which is my childhood favorite show, and I've been doing a series on it. Check the other parts out if you haven't yet. Oh, I'm so motivated. Woo! So motivated. Alright, what's the next part? Alright, fine. I'll stop bullying this arc for like 10 minutes so I can talk about it properly. After the bombast of the Chunin Exam arc, the plot of Naruto chooses to slow down quite a bit and focus on elaborating on character motivations and also plant the seeds for more development and world building. It does this by combining a training arc with a recruitment mission, with a healthy bit of action at the start and end points. Sounds pretty good, the exact kind of arc that would need to happen after a big climax like the Konoha invasion. The content of the arc is surely familiar to you. Jiraiya the Sage sets out to find his old friend Tsunade to offer her the newly vacant seat of Hokage. During this, he takes Naruto on the journey with him to teach him a jutsu that's actually useful. They get attacked by anime ISIS, Sasuke and Kakashi are hit by the PTSD no jutsu, and Naruto eats some ice cream, standard affair. Oh, and also tits, but who cares? This was an arc that I was never particularly fond of as a kid because, like all kids, I was stupid and I had the attention span of a potted plant, so I got bored with this arc very quickly. Has anything changed in 15 years? Well, for starters, I really like the start this time around. As opposed to the previous two arcs, this one takes its time with its beginning, taking an extra minute to show how everyone is and how the village is doing after the attack and without a leader. I talked last time about how the break between the preliminary and final exams was a welcome breather, and the same applies here too. It's a perfectly sized little segment that doesn't overstay its welcome. Once we know how everybody is doing, the arc gets properly started as Naruto and Jiraiya leave the village while two mysterious figures infiltrate the village. This is of course the introduction of the Akatsuki, an evil organization that seeks to extract Naruto's Nine Tails and that would, as you certainly know, end up becoming an immensely important part of Naruto's narrative. I do really like that they're introduced this early. While the transition from Orochimaru to the Akatsuki as a main villainous element is still somewhat sudden, having the Black Cloaks appear now when the universe of Naruto is still being formed helps make them a natural part of this world instead of the random evil group they very easily could have been if they hadn't appeared until like Shippuden. Almost more importantly though is the introduction of Itachi Uchiha, fan favorite mass murderer and an immensely cool character. This is another introduction I feel is really well timed. So far, Itachi has been an invisible force in the plot, an intangible evil that spurns Sasuke even further. So for him to appear now, right as the storm has passed, is a really nice way of immediately upping the stakes again. We are told this is Itachi, we see the Sharingan, and we're immediately like, oh my god, it's happening, which is cool. Not to mention that he effortlessly lives up to the build-up, folding a bunch of Jonin like they're clean laundry with ease. However, between this scene and the one in the hotel, I find myself having trouble believing that Kishimoto planned Itachi being secretly good from the start. The Tsukuyomi is an incredibly fucked up ability, and he uses it very liberally on people he supposedly cares for, including his younger brother whom he loves oh so much. It's just a weird discrepancy that, to me at least, indicates that Kishimoto had different plans for Itachi at this point. But like, whatever, that's a nitpick, so who really cares? Not much more to say here, except that Kurenai attempting Genjutsu on Itachi is genuinely the best joke in this series. Girl, you're out of your league! Another highlight of this arc comes in the form of Naruto and Jiraiya's relationship. It's genuinely sweet to see Naruto engage with someone who's just as goofy as him, but a lot more experienced and nuanced. Moments like them sharing ice cream really cement Jiraiya as a worthy mentor and father figure to Naruto, which is heartwarming. I also really like the Rasengan and its presence in this arc. 80-ish episodes into the series, it's about time that Naruto learns a new trick, and the Rasengan is a perfect fit. It's cool, it's powerful, and easy to remember, both for him and for us. I definitely think as a power, it's at its coolest when it still has a special effect, namely making shit spin. This probably did end up getting ignored in favor of the general powerful strike kind of deal later on, but in this arc it's present and that's cool. Also, I like the training regiment. Naruto in general is really good at making the training arcs feel sensible and well structured, and this is a great example of that. The stages of the Rasengan training make perfect sense, and the creative solutions Naruto comes up with are satisfying and interesting to experience. Naruto in general really shines in this arc. His character has an awesome presence here. One of my favorite moments, for example, is when he finds out about Tsunade and Jiraiya's ties to Orochimaru and calls them out for their inaction, which is like, holy shit, yes! They are idiots for letting him roam free for over a decade, and Naruto pointing that out is just superbly cool. In general, I feel like his characteristics of being this outwardly confident but inwardly somewhat self-conscious guy just works in this arc perfectly, and I would say for the first time in the series so far. Both in Zabuza and in Chunin, I felt like it either swayed in too strongly in one of the two directions, but here it is just right. Also, and next, I mean, and alright, fellas, I gotta be honest with you. This is the hardest script I've had to write in a while, and that is because this arc is not great. I barely have anything to say about it because it's just boring and a chore. This arc is a whole heap of nothing, and I struggle to find anything really to talk about. I started with the positives because honestly I do really like the things I've mentioned, but here I am, sitting here trying to write this script, and all I can think about is, oh my god, I would prefer writing anything else. Because this arc kind of broke my renewed interest in Naruto for a while. It took me a long time to watch this arc, for reasons we'll get into. So if you were here just for the positives, there you go. You may leave if you want to. I'll also try and breeze through these negatives because, honest to God, I don't really want to spend much time talking shit. Like, I know people think I hate Naruto. I really don't. Naruto is very dear to me and I don't want to shit on it. So let's just get through this very quickly. Just get the Spark Notes version of what I thought was wrong with this arc, and let's be done with this. I am so tired of this arc. Tsunade is a nothing character. She gets two tragic backstories and somehow still comes out the other end as an irritating and boring character that never really once grabbed my interest. Fat fucking tits only go so far in making a character stand out, and her entire deal regarding her brother's and husband's deaths just doesn't get enough context to mean anything. I do like that her trauma is related to her spouse rather than a family member, since the whole my family was killed shtick is really played out in the series. But then she gets her brother's death anyway, so like, ugh. Also, side note, how did no one predict Orochimaru being evil when he says shit like this?
It's too bad the boy was so reckless, as if he thought he were invulnerable. And the day after receiving such a lovely gift, too.
Lock him up, please? The central conflict between Tsunade and Orochimaru in this arc is absurd from both sides. The series seriously trying to convince us that Tsunade would sacrifice Konoha for a reincarnation of her beloved ones she knows would not be lasting or complete anyway is honestly just kind of insulting. You know, she's lived in that village most of her life. All the people she's loved come from that village. The people she grew up with sacrificed themselves for that village. So the notion that this serious woman would sacrifice Konoha for something like that, especially considering that she's very well aware of the fact that it won't be a full reincarnation anyway, is odd, and I couldn't ever get behind it, which obviously affected my enjoyment. On the flip side, Orochimaru wants Tsunade to heal his arms. But he can do that himself by just switching bodies again, which is what he ends up doing anyway. And we know that it is possible beforehand because he tells us so. So why the fuck is this even a conflict? It ends up being just an exercise in Orochimaru's sadism, which is like, cool, but please make it entertaining next time. The pace is absolutely fucked. This arc is 20 episodes long, but somehow feels longer than the 60 episode Chunin Exam arc, and a big reason for that is just how slow and stretched out the content is. There regularly are shots that are held for like 5 seconds longer than necessary, which is like, oh, Ocean, you're being stupid, and yes, I am being stupid, I'm recording this in the middle of the night, but trust me, that shit adds up, trust me. And even when we're actually progressing, so much of this arc is just people standing and talking about how they will definitely start fighting soon. I did not have fun with this arc, and the pace was just one big part of it. And what do we get as the big climax? The most boring kaiju fight imaginable, sandwiched between a cool fight between Naruto and Kabuto, and an absurd fight between Kabuto and Tsunade. Bro, Tsunade rewrites Kabuto's entire neural system so that he moves his legs when he wants to use his arms and shit, and then he adjusts to it in like 2 seconds and continues to fight at full power, like, what? And when the fight's over, she goes all, Naruto is destined to be Hokage. Destined to be Hokage. Kishi, are you sure you want to use that word? After the Neji fight, are you sure you want to say it like that? Are you sure what you're doing, Kishimoto? I'm sorry, I really don't enjoy complaining. I know I'm an anime YouTuber and people expect that I love shitting on things, but I really don't. I wouldn't even have made this episode if I thought that, people would accept that I just skipped an arc. And I did want to talk about the cool shit, but oh my god, I did not have fun with this arc. Also, anyone who knows me can now look forward to the eventual war arc review. I went into this hoping I'd learn to enjoy this arc the same way I did with Chunin. I was having so much fun at the start, and while Itachi was there, it was great. But holy crap, as soon as the focus shifted onto the Tsunade shit, it just got... Yeah, no. Let's not stretch this out. 4 out of 10. It has some cool shit at the beginning, but oh my god, no. God, this was painful. Can we, get a good arc in the next episode or something? Please? I am hard. Every series has a defining moment. You probably already know what I mean. However great or not great a series might be, if you have it lodged in your memory, then you probably have one moment, one part or event that immediately comes to mind when someone mentions the story's name to you. These moments might just have personal relevance to you, or they might represent the instance in which a series truly came into itself on a grander level. Dragon Ball has the Frieza fight, One Piece has Enies Lobby, My Hero Academia has Todoroki's Declaration, and Naruto has the Sasuke Retrieval mission. If you go on to the YouTube upload for Naruto Opening 5, Rhapsody of Youth, you might find a top comment that says, "This is the arc where boys became men." I'm usually not a fan of random YouTube comments, comment sections are hell, but this one is absolutely on the money. The Sasuke Retrieval arc is, at its core, a story about innocence lost, and it is also maybe my favorite arc in all of Naruto, with only 2 other potential candidates depending on when you ask me and what mood I'm in. So this video will be less a formal recounting of these events, and more of an analysis / gushing session of all the shit that makes this arc so fucking good. I will of course mention things that bother me, nothing is perfect, but please do not misunderstand. I adore this arc. Let's not waste too much time on summaries, you all know what happens here. Sasuke, seeing the power difference between him and his brother, finally snaps and decides to join Orochimaru, giving up his body in exchange for the strength he needs to avenge his family. Naruto is joined by his actual best friend, Shikamaru, and a team consisting of Shoji, Neji, and Kiba to find and retrieve Sasuke, all the while battling the Sound Four, Orochimaru's squad of elite enforcers and Sasuke's personal guard. As I said, one of the most interesting elements of this arc to me is its relevance to the character's maturity. Before now, the evil and the ugliness of the ninja world was always on the outside, an element, a rot that was to be observed in foreign lands, or a calamity that attempted to crush the leaf and had to be pushed back. But now, with one of their own being corrupted, our cast must accept that the malice of the ninja world penetrates even their idyllic hometown, and that they, just like the adults that guided them, must now take responsibility for that. They are all forced to grow up. It's even better when you take into account that this is the final arc of Naruto's first part. The childhoods of these characters are quite literally forced to end, and it is that ending that ushers in their adulthood with part 2, or as more people know it, Shippuden. This brings me to another concrete thing I love about this arc, its placement. Where an event happens in the story is an underratedly important aspect of storytelling, as having the right element show up at the wrong time can crumble a narrative into incoherence. That's why I adore how the Sasuke arc is situated. It being the final arc of part 1 gives it a paradigmatically crucial quality, making it a monumental turning point for the series and the characters. After Sasuke leaves the village, it's not just the characters that can never truly go back to the happy days of early Naruto. The series itself must change and mature, and I love that. It's a wonderful little way of meta writing. The arc's placement also does wonders for its titular character, Sasuke and his character progression. Based on timing and context, it's very easy to conjecture that this moment right here is where the old Sasuke dies. After being forced to relive his trauma through Itachi's Tsukuyomi, Sasuke is forever changed, and his resolve for revenge is reawakened into a self-destructive urge. I just think it's such a beautifully tragic progression to go from him learning to care for his comrades at the end of Chunin Exams to him being forced back into his role as Avenger immediately after, culminating in him waking from his coma as a much darker, completely different person. This of course flows back into the idea of this arc being the death of the cast's youth. Sasuke has his adolescence killed by reliving his trauma, and his resulting action then causes the death of innocence and youth in the rest of the cast, which is just such a cool and interesting dynamic to inject into your big climax arc. It's also this dynamic that ends up pushing all the relevant characters to new heights, with the entire Sasuke rescue team having to step up and show what they're made of. Up until this point, the kids always had the safety net of the adult Jonin to fall back on. Even during the Konoha invasion, which was a huge deal, the Jonin were doing a lot of work, and while Gaara had to be dealt with by a middle schooler, the likes of Orochimaru and his goons were suppressed by the adults. Not anymore, however. From top to bottom, from the moment the mission starts to its catastrophic failure, this operation is completely up to Shikamaru's squad. And the way each of the members grows into that role of responsibility is so tremendously satisfying. From Neji accepting that he might not be the chosen one, to Choji getting probably the best single episode of the entire series, the desperate struggle against the Sound Four is such an absolute marvel, elevated by some truly great action, of course. An absolute highlight for me was Shikamaru, which is something I feel like I've said in every episode so far. I somehow had completely forgotten how great he is in part 1, or maybe I just didn't relate to him as much as a kid, as much as I do now. Which might say more about me than it does about the character, but oh well. His speech at the start of the arc, his planning during the arc, and his breakdown at his own failure at the end of the arc are such incredibly strong character moments, and they really solidify him as one of my absolute favorite characters to re-experience on this rewatch. But of course, I'd be an idiot to review this arc without talking about the main thing about it. Sasuke versus Naruto. This fight is as classic as it gets. Two rivals battling atop a historical valley, one fighting to reach the darkness, one struggling to save the other. It is the quintessential parting of two friends, and thus it has rightfully etched itself into anime history as a conflict that to this day is referenced and evoked by authors and fans alike. I think a big part of that saliency is the aesthetic and thematic presence this fight has. The entire arc is filled with top-notch action segments, but this battle is on another level, with every episode showcasing a distinct flavor of directorial and productional flair. Even series star Norio Matsumoto makes another appearance, and while his character artwork in this fight is not the greatest, especially not during the dialogue scenes, the fuck is this angle? In motion, his animation remains one of the most beautifully kinetic and malleable eye candy the series has to offer. But beyond just the looks, the emotions of the fight are so simple yet effective, and it's through that it becomes memorable. Complex conflicts are great, I love them, but there's something to be said about the potential detriment of overcomplicating a fight's premise. When the hook of your climax is as simple as, my friend is being an idiot, so I'm gonna punch him until he stops, that makes it easier to remember and relive this fight as you grow and move on. And overall, the mood for this conflict is just set perfectly, and it remains one of the most salient fights in shonen because of it. Lastly, I love that the mission actually fails. Shonen has something I like to call the status quo button, which is basically just a tendency to avoid lasting consequences. This isn't even unique to shonen manga. All media aimed at children is guilty of this, as the desire to keep the premise intact so that dumb babies can watch the series out of order without getting upset inherently clashes with the idea of coherent long-form narratives. It just tends to be more apparent in shonen because it has, at least up until a few years ago, been a lot more interested in coherent narratives compared to Western TV. The point is, I fucking hate the status quo button. Change is, just like conflict, an essential part of any story. You can write without either of those two, but if you do, your story is probably boring and you are probably French. So to have a tendency in shonen where all changes and consequences are poofed away is infuriating to me. Oh, hi Dragon Ball. This arc, however, luckily avoids that trap and does the smart thing. It turns the end of part 1 into the lowest point of these characters' lives, breaking them down with a failure that motivates and drives them from this point onwards, and I must commend them for that. It would have been so easy to just have Sasuke return at the end of the arc and be like, okay, that's cool, now that we've seen that people can be corrupted, we need to have a time skip. And that could have worked, but it would have been kind of stupid, or at least not as good as what we have gotten would have been. Because now that Sasuke is gone, all of these characters have to think about what that means to them and what that means to them and their growth. And I just think that that is a phenomenal way to end the first section of your story. Now, it's time to get into the negatives I had with the arc.
But as I said, remember, none of these are honestly all that bad. They're kind of annoying, but that's it. I just feel it wouldn't be fair if I didn't mention them, because this is a review, at least in the title. Sakura! I'm sure everyone is fucking tired of me bitching about her, but I swear this is the last time. I'm actually watching Shippuden right now, and she's so much better in it, so this is the last time I'm bitching about her, at least for a while. Sakura manages to sneak in one last dumb moment before she gets infinitely better in Shippuden. Under the moonlight, she tells Sasuke that if he leaves her, she will feel just as bad as he felt when he saw his family die. I don't think I have to comment on this. It's dumb, it's bafflingly tone deaf, and puts a dent into what is otherwise a pretty touching scene. It's an isolated thing, like it's really just this phrase that really annoys me, but holy shit, what the fuck, Kishimoto? Since this is a re-watch and not a reread, I do have to mention the issue specific to the anime, of which there is one in this arc. Filler. Remember how I gushed about the placement of the arc? Yeah, that only works if you skip the filler, because not only does the anime ruin Sasuke's character arc by having him wake up from the coma as his regular self to go on a boring filler mission, it also continues the series past the Sasuke arc for 90 whole episodes. And it's not like you can just pretend that these filler parts don't exist. The filler arc before Sasuke's betrayal is actually referenced in his canon conviction to join Orochimaru, and the actual ending of the arc, Naruto leaving with Jiraiya, only happens at the end of the 90-episode filler marathon, and isn't even given its own episode, instead being relegated to the final few minutes of a filler arc about Gaara playing yo-yo. So for the new anime watcher, a huge aspect of the arc is tarnished, which is a huge shame. Next, while I do love the consequences this arc has, I think it actually could have gone a little bit further, in that it should probably have killed off a few characters. Don't get me wrong, characters dying means good writing is an anime take I fucking loathe, but in this case, I do think a few corpses could have made the impact more devastating, namely 3 corpses. Shoji absolutely should have died. Not just because he is hurt, but because the story would have been better for it. He doesn't really do anything after this point anyway, aside from the Asuma stuff in Shippuden, which can be handled via Shikamaru. So in my opinion, having him die after such a phenomenal send-off would have been much better, especially if you consider how much harder it would hit Shikamaru and how much more bitterly it would reinforce the realization that the responsibility of being a Chunin comes at a price. Neji is not as necessary, but I do think he had a good chance to leave the story. And again, he isn't really needed in Shippuden, so like why not? But I also do like his death in the war arc, so this one is kind of whatever. But speaking of does nothing in Shippuden, Lee should have absolutely bit the dust here. He is the character everyone points to when talking about how Part 2 underutilized the sidecast, so he really has no business being there. Meanwhile, killing him off in his fight against Kimimaru would have done a couple of things. As a symbol of youth, Lee's death would further enforce the idea of innocence lost, which, as I said, is one of the most impactful aspects of this arc for me. Additionally, it would actually give his injuries a lasting weight. The surgery might seem like a success at first, but the punishment for his recklessness against Gaara dooming him in the end is more interesting and tragic than him just being magically healed and never having troubles again. And lastly, and most importantly, his death could have interpersonal influence. The reformed Gaara seeing Lee valiantly die against Kimimaru as a result of injuries he got from their fight at the Chunin Exams could make him think more deeply about his past actions and drive him more convincingly towards his eventual position as Kazekage. At the same time, Lee's death could catalyze Guy into reconsidering his life philosophies, something that is hinted at when he sees Lee's injuries but is never really followed up upon. If Guy is allowed to witness a student dying as a result of his philosophy, you automatically push him into an interesting dilemma, one that could inform his increased relevance in Shippuden and his eventual deathmatch against Madara. I do realize that suggestions like these take a lot of extra work, and it's not quite as easy as just saying, keep him dead or keep him alive or whatever, but at the same time, I do think that any consequences these deaths could have had would have been better than what we eventually got. Because don't forget, one of the biggest problems with Shippuden that pretty much everyone agrees upon is that it underutilizes the cast. And one way of shrinking the cast without underutilizing anyone is to kill them off in good ways, which I think this arc had a good chance to do, but didn't, which, you know, whatever, but it's cool to think about. My final issue is not one that exists just in this arc, but is more like a general problem of the entirety of Naruto. It just starts here. With this turning point comes a paradigm shift, as the series becomes predicated on not just Naruto becoming Hokage, but also on Naruto saving his friendship with Sasuke. And that friendship does not exist, at least not on screen. Naruto and Sasuke are only both Leaf Ninja and able to interact for 2 arcs, Land of Waves and Chunin Exams, both of which don't really focus on the relationship all that much. It's more like a secondary feature. At best, you could say that at the end of Chunin Exams, the two have learned to tolerate each other, which is fine for a rivalry, but when the entire series becomes reliant on that relationship's profound emotionality, that simply isn't enough anymore. When Naruto and Sasuke stand in the final valley and scream about how they were like brothers and understood each other like no one else, that falls completely flat because no such friendship has ever been built up, not to this magnitude at least. And it's clear that Kishimoto and Studio Pierrot were aware of this, as both the manga and the anime would continue to inject flashbacks to their childhoods into the story later on to convince us that they were actually friends. But that is simply too little, too late. Again, I don't think it's a badly written friendship, I think it's just not expanded enough before this moment to predicate 15 years of writing on. A better way to fix this would have been to add one more story arc between Chunin Exams and Tsunade, where, due to the Jonin forces being exhausted and Sakura's injuries, Naruto and Sasuke are sent on a mission together where they have to cooperate on their own, something low-key, short, that just forces them to be in a space together and actually develop their friendship. It would have been short, easy, and efficient, but I do realize this suggestion is 20 years too late and kind of pointless. So, in conclusion, this arc is fantastic and I love it so much. I was in middle school when I first got to watch it, and I still remember how much it affected me, seeing these characters go through this shit. Any issues I have are, certainly there, but I don't care too much. Actually, for the most part, it's fun to try and imagine how to iron out these few imperfections. As a kid, I was obsessed with this arc. I would rewatch the German episodes, or at least episode clips on YouTube over and over again. I would replay the entirety of Naruto Ninja Storm just to rewatch the cutscenes. It was magical, and no issues that I have identified on my rewatch could take away from that. No unnecessary suspense. 9 out of 10, amazing finale to part 1. And we are done. At least with the original run of Naruto. This series was a lot of fun, and if you enjoyed it, please let me know and tell me if you would like me to do Shippuden as well. I am watching it anyways, so if you have the interest, just tell me. As long as you guys keep wanting these, I will keep making them. But for now, thank you for watching, and a special thank you to our patrons, including Christian Finkbeiner, Erina, Fiction Ape, Kendra Williams, Sini, Zanji1, and Mr. Meander. That's it for me. Thanks for watching, take care, and be safe. Bye bye. You thought this was gonna be Shippuden, didn't you? Yes, I know. Technically, the next part of my arc-by-arc Naruto review should be jumping into part 2 of the story, Shippuden, and we will get to that in due time, I promise. Subscribe to be notified when that happens, by the way. But right now, I want you to indulge me as I review not the main series, but the first 3 anime movies tied to part 1 of Naruto. You see, while I am re-watching the anime,
When I got to these 3 movies, it was a different experience because, with only one exception, I hadn't seen them before and had no idea what I was in for. So, without any further ado, let's just get right into it with the first movie, Ninja Clash in the Land of Snow. This one is special because it is the only movie out of these 3 that I've actually seen before. Once. It was broadcast as a holiday special on the German channel Super RTL, and we managed to catch it one year. I didn't remember anything about it, however, aside from it vaguely having to do with an actress or some shit like that. And that's basically exactly what the movie's about. A movie crew hires our Team 7 as bodyguards as they embark on a filmmaking journey to the Land of Snow, which had not too long ago been overtaken by a violent technocrat. As the mission progresses, our team discovers that the crew has other motives, and that they are in more danger than they signed up for. If this setup seems familiar to the rising action of the Zabuza arc, it's because it's a straight ripoff in terms of the basic premise. But that's not an inherently bad thing. Anime movies taking elements from the series' popular arcs is a long-standing tradition, and the Zabuza arc is so good, so why not take some inspiration? Beyond this, the plot is mostly enjoyable with a few fun twists and turns. There's some weirdness though, as it always happens with anime movies. For example, Naruto keeps telling Yuki to stop complaining and accept her destiny. Naruto, my man, are you sure you are pro-destiny? You good, buddy? And of course, there is the ever-funny question of continuity and canon. This movie may not be canon, but it does have an outspoken, explicit position in the original Naruto anime. It's supposed to happen right after a mini-arc of the team trying to uncover Kakashi's face, which is a filler arc that happens after Tsunade becomes Hokage. This means that this Sasuke is already scarred by Itachi's Tsukuyomi and should be getting radicalized into revenge right about now, which might make interactions in a casual winter movie like this a bit awkward. The solution? Just don't have Sasuke say or do much. It is kinda lame how little our deuteragonist matters in this movie, but hey, what you gonna do? It did bother me a bit that he seemingly had no reactions to anything that was going on, but he was there to be cool and to be the cool secondary main character, which I guess is fine. I do love their outfits in the movie though. The cloaks really give them a unique feel and they're super nice. Additionally, while the plot itself is, cool or whatever, I love the shit our characters get to do. Naruto puts in work, Sasuke uses the twin lions for like the 2nd time ever, and Sakura gets to make her own new jutsu, which is awesome. Also, fun fact, this movie is the first instance of Kakashi being shown to have been an Anbu, something that Kishimoto would, much later, make canon. It's really cool like this, and we are going to see more examples of anime original stuff becoming canon later on. Speaking of cool, I'm sure you've noticed by now, but this movie is gorgeous. Pierrot movies looking good is natural, but this, and all Naruto movies by the way, is genuine eye candy. It is somehow stuck between the polish of modern anime and the texture of cell animation, and the result is simply stunning. It's kinetic, colorful, grainy, and just wonderful. Add to this the Ghibli-esque direction with long, deliberate shots and only occasional background music, and this movie's atmosphere and style are nothing short of amazing. I cannot hammer home how different this feels from the main anime, and that is something I'm very happy about. Anyway, 7 out of 10, would watch again, time to lick some rocks. Naruto Movie 2, Legend of the Stone of Galel, takes place after Sasuke has left the village, and follows Naruto, Shikamaru, and Sakura, as well as the Sand Trio, as they track down a pseudo-religious cult on the search for an ancient power source called the Stone of Galel, all the while tagging along with their bratty but righteous underling Temujin. This movie is 2 things. It is, again, gorgeous, just like the first one, and it is also boring. It took me almost a full day to watch this crap because it's just so exhaustingly mind-numbing. The plot is at once empty and yet overly convoluted. We have fake charity, brainwashing, horror movie references, misinterpretations of prophecies and war theory, and yet none of it matters because in the end, this is an anime movie that has to come down to Naruto and a faceless baddie throwing hands. It's actually really weird because the main villain's motivation is the exact same thing Nagato would pursue in the main story almost a decade later, but here it is infinitely less interesting.
Also, the music is like bad? So I don't want to spend too much time on the plot because I'd rather talk about pretty much anything else, especially about how pretty this movie is. Just like the last one, it combines great movie quality animation with a pleasant color palette, this time adding a hint of blobness to the character designs, which again just give it a very particular feel. Also, the Konoha flak jackets get redesigned for some reason. Beyond that, the movie has a couple of cool action sequences. The beginning scene sees the Land of Wind be attacked at a beach, with the Sand siblings helming a counterattack. This is such a cool and non-Naruto setting, especially for part 1 of Naruto, and it gives off a unique vibe that's hard to find elsewhere in the series. Sakura's fight also ends up being gorgeous with some intense and snappy combat cuts, and honestly that's all I have to say here. This movie is not worth your time, and it certainly wasn't worth mine. 4 out of 10, let's go look at some tigers. Naruto Movie 3, Guardians of the Crescent Moon Kingdom follows Naruto, Sakura, Lee, and Kakashi as they escort a fat prince and his bratty son back to their home country, only to realize that it has been overtaken by a corrupt minister named Chabadaba, and that they now have to take care of this mess. Right off the bat, this movie distinguishes itself by being really good. The plot is paced in a satisfying sort of way and is a lot more character-driven than the last 2 movies. Seeing this lump of pampered infantility grow and mature into both a leader and a father was genuinely cool and made some of the later moments in the movie hit surprisingly hard. The kid is mostly there to give us that classic Naruto teaches a little dipshit how to behave dynamic, but it does really well at that, with him genuinely learning from Naruto, which is cool. Additionally, setting this movie in the non-canon Land of the Moon allows it to show a very different landscape, country, and economy than what the main series has to offer, which is great. Speaking of great, the movie also gives our folks new outfits to wear, and this, together with the looser animation style, gives the movie a very distinct feel, which is awesome. I have found that these anime movies tend to be at their best when they delve into stuff the main story can't really bother with, and protecting an island tourism paradise and educating its man-child prince definitely falls into that category. Add in some absolutely spectacular animation, especially for Lee's fights, and it is a genuinely great experience. The only really weird stuff about this are the main villains. Since Minister Shabadaba isn't a ninja and doesn't fight, he hires these 3 Walmart baddies who have cool powers and abilities, especially the neurotoxin. That's such a cool idea for an assassin group. But aside from that, they're kind of whatever. They mention that their homeland was destroyed, and a guidebook gives them a name and calls them the Uemon clan, and they're bald, and that's somehow a secret worthy of a reveal? Okay. Lastly, the finale of the movie includes something that almost all Naruto movies have: a new Rasengan. In fact, the last 2 movies did that too, although the first one's Rasengan isn't considered a new Rasengan according to the wiki, so who am I to disagree really? The reason I bring it up now is because in the last 2 movies, they at least made a semblance of sense. Naruto was surrounded by rainbow magic. Rainbow Rasengan, sure. Naruto is surrounded by Earth Spirit magic. Earth Spirit Rasengan, bet. They were never explained, and honestly, they don't do anything special aside from being strong, but hey, that's alright. In this movie, though, they just do not care. Naruto literally just holds up the Rasengan, and because the moonlight shines through it, it becomes the stronger Crescent Moon Rasengan. Like, my man? Usually I'd be mad at this, but it's so goofy and dumb. I'm okay with it. I had fun. Overall, great movie. 8 out of 10. The villain has a funny name. Hi, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I know this isn't Shippuden yet, and I know that's what everyone's excited about. And I want to say thank you so much for letting me know that you're excited about Shippuden, because that's how I know that I should continue. Because, you know, I'm still watching Naruto. I'm currently up to Akatsuki Suppression. In fact, I started it right before recording this. And, you know, as time progresses, I'll get all the episodes out as I get my thoughts sorted and as I write the episode. So thank you for your patience. I hope you enjoyed this video. Also, of course, a big thank you to our patrons, which include Christian Finkbeiner, Fictionape, Victor Perez, Sini, Zanji1, and Mr. Meander. Thank you all so much, and be safe, be well, and I'll see you all next time. Bye bye.